here from the organization that's doing it. So we ask that you simply email Cindy Leyland at our office, and we will get you the information you need in order to submit your request for continuing education. And Cindy's email address is cleyland@practicalbioethics.org, or go to our website, and I think you can actually find us, the staff on there, and click on somebody's name and actually generate an email to her for that purpose. And you'll need to do that. You'll need to initiate that, because we don't have the names of the individuals here, everybody's email address who might want CEs or we're intending to get them. So, and then we also have a handout going around for Don Reynolds, who will be speaking with Rich here in the next session. And I think that's it, right? Cindy? Oh, no, there was one other thing. I wanted to do a shout out to a couple people here who've been working their tails off for us. In addition to Mark and his crew who are hosting, and the great reception, the lunch today and the breakfast today was provided by the university as complimentary to their support for the dinner. So a great thanks to them for their support. Also, Kim Fry, who has been tremendous about helping us in getting this whole thing. Kim, stand up and wave, because it's been great. And then in the booth back there, we have Mike Hellings, who's been helping us with this, and we'll be doing some magic with being able to get Lex Frieden in the room with us in the course of the next couple hours. So anyway, again, our thanks to KCU for being a great host. I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy.
Thank you all for coming back after lunch. There's always a little bit of attrition at lunch. The White House had a name for that. They called it the flake rate. So the people who would at some point leave or not show up. So thank you all for coming back. I hope we have achieved in the morning session one of my personal goals, which is to have your brains join my brains in trying to sort all of this out, to introduce some new concepts, understanding that they're completely compatible with other things that we've been doing and thinking, and how do these all richly blend together just for the goal of improvement, for the benefit of people, especially as they face advanced illness and end of life. So what I'm hoping for this afternoon, or what I'm planning for, is that this next conversation can be some thoughts, some reaction. We've got mics set up, more of a time to talk together. Then we'll have a panel after that. Michelle Needens is here. Stephanie Moore is going to join us. It's really important we talk about patients, people who are with advanced illness and end of life, and then end it with Lex Frieden, who's just simply a rock star in the field of disability, who will join us virtually. So my next two guys have joined me, so let me introduce them. And I think Rich is going to go first, but I'll tell you who both of them are. So Richard Payne, who's right here closest to me, is the John B. Francis Chair in Bioethics at the Center for Practical Bioethics, and the Esther Colliflower Professor of Medicine and Divinity at Duke University. So he has flown in from North Carolina to spend a few days with us. At the center, Richard is also the medical director for Payne's, our project to deal with chronic pain. I was glad that Mike talked about chronic pain this morning. He travels extensively, lecturing on bioethics and palliative care. He holds a joint appointment at Duke to the Divinity and medical schools. He's the former director of the Duke Institute for Care at the End of Life. He's board certified in neurology with added qualifications in pain management and medicine. I looked through your resume. That was very long. You've been associated in some way with Peter Bent Brigham Hospital in Boston, Weill Cornell Medical School in New York, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and MD Anderson in Houston. So you're well-traveled, as well as very knowledgeable. He served on numerous boards, including the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization and the Hastings Bioethics Center. He's an internationally known expert in neurology, oncology, pain management, and palliative care, and bioethics. He's had 275 publications, and he's ours. So we're just thrilled that Rich is a part of the center and provides so much to us, so much history and experience and direction for us. Don Reynolds is sitting over here wearing his KU red. He is, you like that? He's the assistant research professor and director at the Office for Responsible Research at the MU Center for Health Ethics. Don is a fellow at the Center for Practical Bioethics, which is a designation that honors his contributions to the center. He goes way back from the beginning of the center when his sister Mary Beth Blake helped found the center. So you have been volunteered, voluntold, brought into the fold for years, I think, with the center. Let me turn my page here. Stop wandering around. Am I helping you by wandering around over there, Matthew? His initial project with the center focused on the healthcare preferences of people placed under guardianship in Missouri. From that work, he began to work with UNKC's Institute for Human Development to address healthcare decision-making by people with developmental disabilities. He was also involved in a national project called Last Passages that addressed end-of-life decision-making by and for people with disabilities. His clinical and research areas cover the responsible conduct of research and ethics of translational science. He has written about identifying and addressing ethical issues in advanced chronic illness and at the end of life. So I have asked, I think Rich will go first and then Don, to absorb and kind of react to this morning. These were some new ideas and concepts that are completely compatible with bioethics, but they're slightly different. So Rich, I want to turn it over to you. How does this all resonate and fit with bioethics? What did you hear? What can you kind of enlighten us as we start to move concepts together? You've got a mic right there, and I think you're going to come up here. Come on up. You can be wherever you want. Do you have the lavalier on?
No, but
do you want it on, or do you want?
Yeah, let me put it.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to do something while you wait. Let's clap for Rich, because I want to make sure you all are awake, okay? Get the blood flowing.
There you go. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Great. Great. So, great to be back in my second home. Sometimes even feels like my first home here in Kansas City. I've been asked to actually listen and respond to the comments made this morning, and there were many, many really great and interesting comments. Kathy Enfield started us off, and I thought actually one of the first things she said is something I really want to focus on. And she said that she was in the doctor's office and the doctor talked right past her. He did not see her. I want to really focus on that. And there's ethics in here. Secondly, Mike talked about, among the things about, he made a comment about pain and the pendulum swinging between kind of being sensitive to pain management and then more sensitive to substance abuse. And so where's the pendulum now? We're working in that area. I want to talk a little bit about that. Jean and Kathy Greenlee talked about people making thoughtless comments around, if I had your condition, I would die. And that's, again, a kind of a blindness and a kind of not seeing. So I want to come back to that. And then there was and Tyrone talked about the challenges of dealing with the health system, not only as a person with a disability, but as an African American man, and challenges and so I want to talk about that as well. And along the way, there were lots of comments about autonomy, which gets us right into kind of a big bioethics principle, and I want to weave some of my comments about that. And I'll do this all in 20 minutes.
Okay.
If that's good. Okay, this is a pedagogical point. So I'm a medical educator, among other things, and one of the things that I really try to get the health profession students that I teach, medical students and nursing students in particular, is how is it that you actually see the person in front of you so that you can actually be most effective in dealing with them. And I actually have a few pedagogical exercises, because the other thing that Kathy Enfield said is, what are we doing about this? And I think one of the things that I feel I can do about this is to be as effective as possible at teaching the next generation to be more insightful and mindful of seeing the person in front of them not just as a list of problems, but as actually a person. So here are some of the pedagogical things that I do with my students and that I'd like to share with you. So here's a painting by John Singleton Copley, a famous painting called A Boy with a Flying Squirrel. It's in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And there's an exercise that we do. And the students find it very hard to do this, Kathy. We ask them to sit, not say a word, and look at this painting and picture for 30 minutes. And then describe all of the things that they see. And actually, when you're forced to do that, you notice a whole lot more than just a boy with a little squirrel. You notice that in his hand there's this beautiful, this painting is a masterpiece of composition, by the way. But there's this beautiful gold necklace there hanging off of his right pinky. And you actually have to look to see that. But it's right there in front of you. You notice that the mahogany table here is really just a masterpiece. The way things are reflected in that, the ruffles in his shirt, it's just amazing. You notice that actually that little flying squirrel is really done very well, but you might also notice that his ears of the squirrel are the same shape as the ears of the boy, and that there are lots of things about that squirrel that's actually represented in the boy. And so I ask my students to really look and describe what you're seeing. Take the time to look, and it's a great exercise. Then, of course, we talk about translating that into what are you seeing when that man or woman, boy or girl, comes to see you as a patient. Second pedagogical exercise. Some of you have probably seen this. Okay, I call it the Godfather Exercise. My favorite movie of all time. There's a scene in the movie in which Michael Corleone says, "My father taught me many things. Among the most important was," he said, "try to see the world around you as others see the world. When you do that, you realize that anything is possible." Very profound statement. It's a profound statement about looking, seeing, being perceptive. And for my health profession students, it's getting out of your white coat to start relating to the person in front of you as a fellow human being. We have a pedagogical exercise that we key off of this, which I call a four corners exercise, in which we give questions. These are now, I'll just give representative questions, but this is all about trying to understand how another person might look at the same environment, same set of facts, and actually see something slightly different from the way you see it. So, for example, here I was teaching a course in ethics about fairness and justice, and the details of this are not important, but there was a California Supreme Court decision, Moore v. Regents, in which the court found that once a person's body tissue has left that person, regardless of whether or not they consented, that body tissue is no longer owned by that person, and therefore the person cannot control it. Now, I don't know. So that was the decision. So the exercise here is to ask the students, do you agree or disagree with this? And to answer honestly, because I wouldn't say answer, I scramble the papers, give it to another student, and say, now go to the four corners of the room and talk about the answer that you have in your hand. So you may have answered, I strongly agree with this statement, but end up with a paper that says, I strongly disagree. Now your task is to actually reason through why a person could have given the opposite answer. And it's amazing. If the questions are well constructed so that they get at things that are not totally black and white, you always get a spread, even in a room of like-minded individuals like this. It's another pedagogical exercise, getting people to see differences and to see and perceive things that they may not see. Here's another question on Henrietta Lacks. This is a famous case in which the HeLa cells. And so there's a whole debate as to whether the Lacks family or future heirs should be paid reparations because they took, her cells were taken. People made billions, yet her family lives and still lives in poverty. And actually, before the Affordable Care Act, had no health insurance at a time when there were people making billions. So the question is, should they be paid reparations? Actually, the NIH just struck an agreement with the family to get them involved in examining some of the studies, or giving consent for studies on the HeLa cells. But that agreement specifically forbade the family being paid reparations. So the question is, do you agree or not disagree? And then this is another question. It was another example of there being a spread across the room, and now you're having to understand why someone would see something differently than you would see. So this is just a represented example of the kinds of things that I think we should be doing more in medical writ large education. It's more than about black and white facts. It's about how we're perceiving and seeing the world, and how more importantly, our patients perceive the world, and then how do we help them. Now, joke. There are four great principles of bioethics. This is my favorite joke. There's autonomy, and I can't remember the other three. Right? And of course, we know the other, beneficence, non-malfeasance, justice. But, as has been said actually by many of the speakers, we are very focused, particularly in our Western and U.S. society, on the importance of autonomy. And autonomy comes out of a notion of respect for persons, and for the need for people to have self-determination. But in order to do that, and this has been commented on by previous speakers, you must have information, access to information that's vital to making an informed decision. And I think that's particularly important in the context of people living with disabilities, in terms of planning transitions, changing living environments, and managing other health issues. Now, people often kind of conflate autonomy with individualism and independence, and this has been discussed too, but I think it's important to say that meaning of individualism and independence is culturally determined in many cases. There's another saying I like to teach my students. Everybody is like all others, like some others, and like no other. One person, three identities. And the challenge of providing, person-centered healthcare is to understand, actually, an individual across these dimensions. It is very difficult, let me just say, let me hold that thought until I get to Tyrone's comment. This is an essay that I required reading for all of my students. Gilbert Meilander is a theologian and bioethicist, and he wrote this essay saying, you know, I want to be a burden to my family. And this is in the context of talking about advanced care planning, etc. His point was his point was several. His point was that we don't come here into this world as isolated individuals. Other speakers have made this point. We humans are relational, live in community. We find ourselves living with other persons, beginning with our family, and we are asked to share the burdens of life while caring for each other. Family, broadly defined. And he said, it's a good thing for us to think about burdening others because we might be less tempted to injustice. And, you know, it's a good thing that we see the dying in this sense as a burden to the living so that we can't just ignore it. And then finally, in talking about his wife and the fact that he designated his wife as his healthcare surrogate, he said, he did that knowing that it's a burden, but he says, what can we do? But he felt confident that she would always ask this question, what can we do to benefit the life that he still has? Realizing that answering this question will put a burden on her, but because she loves him, she would welcome the burden. So the question is, how should we, in community, share a burden of caring, and basically love and caring are verbs, and it's a good thing that we're burdening each other with this. I think this is a very important perspective, and it's a perspective that helps us, that keeps us, I think, from minimizing and marginalizing others who are not like us. So autonomy, as we've been talking about, is the ability to self-govern, right? But it's dependent very much on the type of community in which we live to express that. The relationship to others in community is actually a precondition for expressing autonomy. And as I understood the conversations around supported decision-making, that is actually required, this notion of shared and supporting people, all persons, but particularly persons with disability, in the decisions that they must make to fully express their autonomy requires that we have a supportive decision-making framework. Now, someone mentioned dignity. Here's a very provocative comment. Ruth Macklin, a famous bioethicist, said dignity is a useless concept. Why did she say that? She said, well, in the context that we usually refrain it, we're just really talking about autonomy. When we say death with dignity, we're talking about somebody being able to fully be self-determined in how they die. And her point was, how would you know, other than the fact that perhaps they are not being able to make a fully autonomous decision, that their dignity has been compromised in some way. So she's critical of this context, of this term in the context of the way it's traditionally used. Now, I think about that a little differently. I hear where she's coming from, but I think as some of the other speakers said, I think if we hold to notions of an intrinsic or inherent dignity that we have as human beings by virtue of the fact that we are somebodies and are human beings, then I think that gives us a different window into what we mean by dignity, as opposed to a kind of conception of dignity where we are trying to attribute some specific aspects of what is worthy and what is value to another person. So I'm a big believer, and I think we have to hold to the fact that people should be treated with dignity by the simple notion that they are human beings, not by whether and what kind of values or worth we can attribute. Tyrone gave his story about, I thought the van story was very interesting, but I was also struck by his episode, the problem he had with Valium and getting that prescribed and people kind of being very suspicious of him. And there's no question that his intuition and inference was correct, that a lot of what he was experiencing can happen to everybody, but as he's particularly vulnerable as an African-American man. I mean, we have studies about this, right? The Institute of Medicine published this study, Unequal Treatment, documenting these kinds of disparities that are not only socioeconomically based, but are based in terms of racial issues. One of the things they quoted in that report was this paper, for example, from the New England Journal of Medicine, in which these actors were given scripts that expressed the identical symptoms. They all described to their doctors symptoms of significant heart disease in the same way. And yet, they were given different treatment recommendations, with men being given more aggressive treatment, men getting different treatment recommendations than women, black men and women given treatment recommendations than white men and women. Published in the New England Journal, 1999. So he is correct. Now, I can't imagine how more difficult this might be as a black man, black woman living with a disability. Something very provocative has come up related to that, which is ethics implications. So Elizabeth Blackburn in the pink is a Nobel laureate. She was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology in 2009 for working out the biology of telomeres. Telomeres are these DNA segments on the ends of chromosomes, and it's very important fundamental biology because they regulate the length of chromosomes, and it turns out that the length of chromosomes is very important to determining how cells die or whether they continue to live. Fundamental biology. She published a very provocative paper actually saying that discrimination, racial bias, and telomere length were correlated in the outcomes of some African American men who perceived significant racial discrimination, and in fact contributed to premature aging. Here's the conclusion of this paper. Results suggest that multiple levels of racism, as perceived by the individuals, including interpersonal experiences, operated jointly to accelerate biological aging. Societal efforts to address racial discrimination in concert with efforts to promote positive in-group racial attitudes may protect against this premature aging. So here's a really interesting thing, actually correlating a biological process with a social, societal ill. Now, I will hasten to say correlation doesn't equal causation, but they're already working on hypotheses as to how perceptions of stress and kind of the effects on hormonal release may in fact relate to telomere length. And I'm just about finished here, Kathy. I think that was my last slide. So for autonomy to be fully expressed, and autonomy being the great principle in ethics, we need people in relationship to each other. to be fully expressed, and we need people to be truly informed about their options and choices, and of course that happens in the context of their personal values. And in order for we clinicians to do that most effectively, we actually have to see the person in front of us. So that's kind of what I took away from today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.